Okay, Bob.
Thanks, Jenny. Hey, to everyone out there, a couple different things too, more logistically. We are expecting a large amount of people on this call. So we've set this up as a webinar. So if you, so therefore you're muted coming in and you're continuing to be muted throughout this presentation. So please use the Q&A or the chat bar within Zoom for specific questions. Because ideally what we're trying to do is to take the first 20, 30 minutes or so to review the American Rescue Plan Act changes and how it affects small businesses, and then use the rest of the time, 15 minutes or so for Q&A. So we're looking at 45 minutes. So again, put your questions into the chat Q&A piece of Zoom. And again, as Jenny mentioned, we will be sending the recording and the PowerPoint that we're presenting here today later this afternoon, ideally, or tomorrow. So with that, let's kick it off. So before I do the introductions, maybe there's some people out there a little confused on what are we talking about again. So it's almost been, unfortunately, almost been about a year since the CARES Act passed in April of 2020. And in that, since the CARES Act, Congress has made further refinements to what was released, addressed different markets that maybe weren't addressed properly. And with that, there was two other acts that were passed in 2020 after the CARES Act, with the last one being passed at the end of December. The American Rescue Plan is really the third one coming out of the CARES Act. And basically, again, it is more of a, I'm going to focus, the intent is really, I want to focus on specific areas that somehow were not addressed in other iterations of this act through Congress, or were neglected. And that they wanted to address. So it's becoming much more focused on specific areas. It's becoming a little bit more lenient in certain areas, which we'll cover here in a second. And probably the biggest thing is it's addressing a market that was really probably ignored for almost a year now, and that's the restaurant market, fast food market, with some substantial changes with it. So that's what we're going to cover today. In regards to who's presenting, I'm Bob Sifferman. I'm a certified SCORE mentor out of our Fort Worth chapter. And Mark Lenz, who is a colleague of mine, is also out of the Fort Worth chapter as a certified SCORE mentor. Mark and I will both be jointly presenting here. We've been gifted to have also a guest with us today, Linda Williams, who is the Economic Development Specialist for the SBA in North Texas, headquartered out of the Fort Worth area, is also on board with us. And Linda, is there some words you want to say right now? Or you want to hold off, or I'll leave the...
I really just very briefly, I just wanted to thank SCORE Fort Worth for this fantastic opportunity. We really, from our district office, the Dallas Fort Worth district office, we really lean quite a bit on Fort Worth, the Fort Worth chapter of SCORE. They are up to the minute on things that are going on, and we're very thrilled that they have stepped out in front with this and are providing this information. These programs are enhancements. I like exactly how Bob described them. The programs are leaner in some area and more focused in others. So it's a lot of information in a short period of time. I'll turn it over to them, but just before I do want to mention we do have an email list where we post updates. All these programs are really being updated, and SBA will be tuned into SCORE in the future on their webinars as well. But sba.gov/updates is where you can go after the event and just sign up to get bulletins from us. That's really all I had to say, Bob. Bob and Mark, I'll let you take it away. You've got a lot to cover, a long way to go. Thank you very much.
And Jenny, can you do me a favor and make sure in the notes that we send back to everybody with these copies that we have that website that Linda talked about, since we don't have it in the deck?
Okay.
Okay. So one favor we're going to ask everybody here, being from a SCORE perspective, I'm being a little parochial here. One thing that would help us out a lot is if you follow us, if you find what we're doing of value. So we have up on that page right now is a QR code that if you take your camera, take a picture of it, we'll go to our site. If you could follow us, like us, we're in Facebook and we're in LinkedIn, and we're known as SCORE Mentors Fort Worth. So again, anything you could do to possibly follow us, like us, forward information, to your network would be greatly appreciated. So let's get into, as Linda says, she didn't quite say we're an experts, which I appreciate she didn't doing that, but she did say we're forward thinking in regards to that. So sometimes when we're forward thinking, we're a little bit ahead of where all the policies, procedures, specifically from the SBA, have been announced. They have a tendency to trickle out a little bit later after the bills are announced, and rightfully so. There's a lot of details they have to figure out and how to approach going about with all these changes. So our disclaimer basically was that there will be more clarification in regards to these programs. Some of them are not fully released yet, but we want you to be aware of them and make sure you're planning for that. So when they are released, you have all the information and you're ready to apply for them. And so there'll be enhancements, clarifications. One thing we will do from a SCORE Fort Worth standpoint, and that's why we'd love you to also be checking our website at fortworth.score.org, is we'll be continuing putting updates into our website. So there's a resource page in our website that has additional information and clarification over the next couple of weeks and maybe a month of additional information around this act and previous acts or clarifications to previous information. So again, visit us at fortworth.score. Also, SBA.gov is another site you should be visiting us at. But also the other thing we encourage you is that this is information we're relaying. We don't necessarily know your business, the ins and outs, and how you do business and what you prefer. So we provide this information for you, but you should really be taking this information back to your lawyers, your CPAs, your financial advisors to really come back with hey, this is the best solution to go forward for your specific company. We encourage you that. However, we're also available with SCORE. So if you need further mentoring discussions, we're also available to do that. And again, you can reach us at our website to schedule up some mentoring sessions. So let's finally get into what we're going to talk about. So there's really 5 major areas that have been enhanced or added within the American Rescue Plan. Now, on the far right side is just an overview graph of all the dollars that was part of this program. And if you see in the upper right-hand corner a little bit of the slice is what we're really talking about today. And it really is about those issues that affect small businesses, because obviously you've been through a lot in the last 12 months and will continue to struggle through some of the issues going forward here. But again, I think there's some good news for many areas. So the first thing is, and this is the biggest change, is that this act has created the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, or RFF, and we'll talk more detail on it in a second. There's been updates to the Paycheck Protection Program, updates to the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which we'll talk about, updates to the Employee Retention Tax Credit, and an update on the Venue Grant Program. So when I say there's updates, that is updates since the last stimulus bill that was passed at the end of December. So these are just very recent updates. So if you think you knew what was happening back in November, things may have changed a little bit. We want you to be a little cautious on that. So again, with that, let me just kind of get right into, if I could, the package itself. But maybe before I say that, and let me back off here a little bit. The other thing I want to say is, from a SCORE perspective, just as a real 30-second commercial here, is that SCORE, if you're not familiar with us, we do really 3 things. We're an all-volunteer organization. So Mark and myself are volunteering, giving back to the community with our expertise and our experience to help people become much more productive and profitable, quicker and easier from a small business standpoint. And we do that through one-on-one confidential mentoring, virtually, in person, by phone, email. The second thing we do is we offer workshops on a variety of different topics. So each chapter does that. We do about 12 to 15 a month. And you can get that information off of our website too, the workshops that we do. And then thirdly, what we do is we provide templates for you to help develop business plans, marketing plans, financial analysis, et cetera. And we also have probably 200 free webinars that's accessible, that you can access on a variety of different topics. So that's what we offer. SCORE has a little bit less than 300 chapters in the United States. Fort Worth is about a chapter of about 65 volunteers. So with that, I'm done with my commercial. Let's go into then the RFF, excuse me. So this is the big one. This is the biggest change. So what has happened now is that Congress has allotted $25.9 25 billion, excuse me, in grants to restaurants. Now, this is grants. This is not loans, all right? So what this saying is, I don't want to say it's free money, but it's money that you don't have to pay back. So unlike the PPP or the Eidl loan programs where there's paybacks, you may have some forgiveness. This is really not a loan program, it's a grant program. Again, there's some focus now that going after the underserved communities, maybe in past programs. So specifically 5 billion of the 25 billion is allocated to restaurants. This is restaurants only, with less than 500,000 of revenue, all right? And then in the first 21 days, prioritized grants will go to women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and socially or economically disadvantaged individuals, okay? I'd like you to hold off here. We're going to talk about when this grant is opening and what you have to do here. So maybe I have some questions on that. Just hold off on that a second. But just keep in mind that it doesn't mean if you're not a women-owned, veteran-owned, socially or economically disadvantaged individuals, it doesn't mean you can't apply for a grant in 21 days. It just means that prioritization will go to those organizations. Who does not qualify for this grant? Any publicly owned companies do not qualify for this grant. Any government managed businesses do not qualify. And what's a government managed business? A government, a business that does the work for the government, such as the United States Postal Service, for example, is a company, but it does the US work that they don't qualify. And there's certain companies that are partially owned by the government and they don't qualify. Affiliates or restaurants that have over 20 locations do not qualify for this. And businesses that have filed for the venue operator grant do not qualify for this grant. Now, Mark at the end of this will talk about the venue operator grant. However, just so there's no confusion up front, I would like to define what the difference is between a venue and a restaurant, because there's sometimes a crossover there. So look at it that says, am I somebody that provides food, alcohol, drinks, whatever, and in order to encourage more of that being sold, I bring in entertainment? Then you're a restaurant. If I'm a location that brings in entertainment, and in order to bring in more customers, in order to satisfy my customers' needs while they're here, I'm going to supply them, or I'm going to sell to them food or alcohol. Then you're a venue. I don't want to be real simplistic, but then you're a venue. So it's usually pretty self-explanatory. If you want to get into very much details of it, you'd be glad to look at the act, and we'll have some more information about it, how to differentiate it. But again, if I provide food, alcohol, and I'm bringing in entertainment to drive more of that, I'm a restaurant. If I provide entertainment and I'm just providing food or alcohol to satisfy the customers that are looking for the venue, then I'm a venue. Franchise restaurants, so those people that maybe own McDonald's or any type of franchise, they do qualify. So not McDonald's necessarily, but the people who own the franchise restaurants, they do qualify for this grant. So what are the considerations of the grant? A company can get up to $10 million of grant monies, but no more than $5 million per location. The grant amount is going to be based on a difference of your revenue loss from 2019 to 2020, right? So it's the difference between revenue loss between 2020 and 2019. There'll be special calculations, which we don't have the details yet that I'm aware of, but there'll be special calculations for businesses not open for full year, excuse me, in 2019, or not open until 2020. So again, though you might not have even been in business in 2019, if you've opened in 2020, you still have flexibility to get a grant. Again, as more of those details come out, we will provide those onto our website. So what does the grant cover? Okay, it's going to cover payroll cost. And again, in the past, we talked about payroll costs being, actual pay to employees, but it's a benefit cost to the employees, or payroll cost, being if you pay for insurance, pension, et cetera, that's all payroll cost. Mortgage payments for your facility, for your restaurant, the rents, utilities, and maintenance for that restaurant, operational expenses to keep it running. It could be commitments of services, whatever, let's say from a technology standpoint, where you're paying for cloud-based solutions, point of sale type solutions, those were also covered. Paid sick leave, as I mentioned, and then supplies. So these supplies for restaurants can be a large amount of dollars, because those supplies are not only supplying paper products, et cetera, utility and utensils, whatever plates, but also PPE that you've had to provide. Maybe it's special dividers you had to put in, socially distanced, whatever, but keep in mind all PPE is also considered supplies for the restaurants that are applying for that grants. So they can cover all those costs. Then the last part is the grant amounts, and this is important because that's not always true for some of the grants in the past. The grant amounts will not be treated as taxable income. So the government will not be coming back to you and saying you now owe tax on the grant amount. Secondly, the expenditures that you do with the grant dollars will be deductible from income tax standpoint. So it's kind of loosening up some of the restrictions here. Again, you won't be paying tax on this grant amount, and the dollars you use for expenses will be still deductible in your income tax. So this is where it's still a lot of unknown here, and that's the grant itself. So if people are familiar with the PPP, is you went to your local bank to apply for a PPP, or local financial institution. With the grant, this money is going to be coming directly from the SBA. So the SBA will have set up, though it is not there today, and hopefully it will be set up in April timeframe, but I do not have a commitment on that yet, but let's go with the early April timeframe. That the application, you would go actually to the SBA.gov website, and that's where you would apply to the grant. And again, we'll keep you updated once we get that exact site and the exact location. However, if I was you, I'd keep checking through the SBA website on a daily basis just to see if it's been opened or not. Again, you want to be checking for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund on the SBA website. So, but there is things you can start to do now and not wait until that goes live, because waiting to go live will just delay you getting this processed if you've not done this already. So start getting together all your documentation for gross receipts for 2019 and 2020. All right, whether it's your financials, whether it's the actual receipts itself, the details of that, make sure you're starting to get that together, work with your accountant, if you don't have one yourself, and getting that information together so you're ready to go, boom, day one, when the SBA website opens for this grant. The other thing is, if you do not have a DUNS number or a Dun and Bradstreet number, you need to have one to apply for this grant. So what you need to do is go to and these are hot links that we're showing in this document here, that you need to go to DNB website to register, asking you some basic information. It takes a couple days, is my understanding. And that you will then be sent a DUNS number or DNB number. You can also call 866-705-5711 to register. I guess I would just suggest do it online. It's probably a lot easier, and you'll get that in a couple days. The other thing you need to do, because you're getting a grant through the government, the government has a website called SAM, or System for Award Management, and it's basically sam.gov. We have a hot link to it right here on this page here. But you need to apply for a SAM number, or a System for Award Management number from the government. So get to that website, fill in the required information on that website. Again, not real difficult information. And that will take you a couple weeks. Okay, so that doesn't come that quickly. That's why you need to be doing that real quickly. Day one is getting the number, because hopefully by that time frame, then the grants will be open in regards to applying for that. So with that, let me now turn it over to my colleague, Mark Lenz, who will talk a little bit more about the Paycheck Protection Program.
Thanks, Bob, and good afternoon, everyone. The items I'm going to talk about, these updates are mostly related to existing programs And the updates relate mostly to eligibility and dollar amounts available, and the mechanics of how you apply and how you calculate what the loan might be is still the same. So if you have questions on that, we provided that information in previous webinars, and you can go back to our previous webinars on our resource page, but we're not going to go through that. We're just going to talk about the updates. For PPP, the Act added $7.25 billion of funding. There's still plenty of funding left for PPP, as I understand it. And although the date to apply expires officially in 8 days, Congress has been talking about extending the application date to May 31st, and it sounds like that's likely to happen. No guarantees, but likely. From an application standpoint, the new act is less stringent and allows certain nonprofits, specifically non-503c organizations and digital media organizations that could not apply before to apply. So that is new information. There is a IFR that will be linked later in this document that has been issued that will talk to more details of that. And also for sole proprietors and independent contractors, since the last time we talked about these, the rules have allowed utilization of gross income versus net income on Schedule Cs to increase the amount of available dollars. And lastly, for nonprofits, for 503Cs, you can have up to 500 employees per physical location, up from 500 employees per entity previously. So it allows other nonprofits a little more access to the PPP. Next page, Bob. EIDL grant and loan. This update also provided $15 billion more in EIDL loan funding. And I'm still trying to understand the details of this, but it's from what I've read, it sounds like a combination of additional loans and potential targeted advances to certain businesses that suffered revenue loss greater than 50%, located in low-income census tract areas, and employ 10 or fewer people. Again, going after the smaller companies that may not have been able to get money previously. But you'll have to watch the details as they come out to really find out whether this affects you or not. A real nice thing for many people is all disaster loans have been extended as far as when you have to make your first payment. Disaster loans made in calendar 2020, the due date was extended, or the first payment due date was extended from 12 months to 24 months from the date of the note. And for any loans made in 2021, extended from 12 months to 18 months from the date of the note. And you can check on the website when you get your copy of the deck. You can hot link to the website to find more information about that. The expanded employee tax credit was extended. Previously, that credit only applied for the first 2 quarters of 2021, and the new law extended it the whole way through December 31st, which will give opportunity to companies for 4 quarters worth of that credit, as long as they are eligible each quarter based on the criteria. There are also some other businesses that started after February 15th, 2020 that were ineligible before that are now eligible if they meet the requirements as noted on this slide. But generally for smaller businesses with gross receipts less than $1 million. And there's also one new provision for severely financially distressed, that should say employers, not employees, but an employer that had gross receipts reduced by more than 90% compared to the prior year. So that would be companies that basically had to shut down and couldn't even open at all. So they have eligibility that will help them that they didn't have before. Remember, the employment retention credit is a refundable tax credit. So even if you didn't pay enough taxes, you can get IRS to write you a check. And we highly recommend you work with your qualified CPA or financial advisor in determining this. This is purely tied to your tax returns, and this will be based on IRS rules and regulations, which we all know can be very complex. All right. The shuttered venue operators grant Bob talked about briefly. Another $1.5 billion was added to the grant. Any of you who fit in this group of venue operators know this hasn't been made available yet, but this week or last week, the SBA announced that its portal for this grant will be open on April 8th. So that's 2 weeks away. So we'll all know what the details are at that point in time. And under the new act, whereas before you could either receive the operator's grant or a PPP loan, but not both, they're going to allow that you can get the venue operators grant and a PPP, but the venue operators grant would be reduced by any PPP loan amount you receive. All right. Just one more thing. There are a couple of indirect aid programs that also came under the act where Congress is going to provide $10 billion to the states directly. And at some point, we don't know how yet, but the states will make that money available through grants and loans to companies in those states. And they've allowed $100 million for a community navigator program that's going to, again, help educate companies, small businesses.
And maybe what happened in the last two iterations is that same monies were set aside for local governments in the past. And people that are in Fort Worth area may realize the city of Fort Worth did a loan program. Tarrant County and here did also a loan program. So we're kind of assuming we're going to see some of that coming out later also. I don't know if it will be a loan or be a grant, but specifically very focused towards specific geographic areas.
Okay, Bob, next page. We invite you to go to our webpage here, which we provide a link to. It has links to all of the important COVID-related IFRs and FAQs and forms and applications to directly link to the SBA or Treasury or whoever it is. So we think it's a valuable resource for you for kind of one-stop shopping that we will keep updated as new information is made available. And we also added just the links to the documents I referred to in the presentation, the PPP IFR and the shuttered venue operator grant FAQ that have come out since the new law was enacted.
Mark, could you take a second to define what an IFR is?
It's an interim final, and my brain just went blank.
Final report?
It's not report, but it updates all the rules. And it's not rules, I don't think. It could be. Linda might know better off.
It is. You got it. It's rules.
Okay, rules. So it has the latest on the rules, and it's interim because it's not totally final yet. Interim final is the way they describe it, and they update them every time something changes. But we have all the IFRs that have ever been released related to all these acts on our webpage, or links to them. Okay, caveats. Again, as Bob said at the beginning, we tried to get this stuff in front of you so you can at least be thinking about it. We don't have all the answers or all the information, as Bob said, because some of these things have not been fully fleshed out yet. And forms and applications and processes will continue to come out certainly through April 8th, which is when the SBA said the SVOG portal will be open. And I've read that the restaurant revitalization fund may piggyback on some of the things that come out of the SVOG, since they're both grants. So they may kind of be similar timing or one after the other as far as the way you apply. Obviously, as Bob said, check with your accountant, check with your lawyer. They know your business better than we do and can make sure that everything is done according to Hoyle. Check with your banking institution to determine what's required for EIDL, PPP. SBA actually put out an email I saw yesterday that to make sure if you're doing a PPP loan, you need to apply with a lender. And I think some people may be confused that they're supposed to do something through the SBA directly, but that's not the case. All right, and lastly, check the SCORE Fort Worth and SBA government.gov websites. And on the next page, you'll see the direct links to both of those. And again, as Bob said, we'd love for you to follow us on Facebook so you can get our updates as all of these things happen, both on COVID and many non-COVID business things of benefit to the small business community. So without further ado, we're going to open up the session to your questions so we can see if we can help you with specific things you're interested in. So Jenny, you want to?
Yes, so have a few questions. How can a Schedule C filer reapply for the PPP to use the gross income if the first and second PPP was used for their net?
That is an interesting question, because based on what I read yesterday, there is no way to do that. If you applied under the net, you can't go back and apply under the gross. There are people trying to get that changed, but like everything else, there's no guarantee that that opportunity will be made available. But people know that people who were quick about doing things were disadvantaged by being quick, and whether that's fair or not is being debated as to whether somebody just filing a quick application should be penalized for doing that. So I think we may hear more coming, and I don't know if that's a Congress thing or an SBA thing or who makes that final decision.
Okay. Where do we get the application for the second PPP loan, or is it the same as we did before?
You can get that on our website. There's a link directly to it on that website, the resource website that was just a couple of pages ago in the deck. You can also go to sba.gov, but we already have the specific link right on our page to take you there.
Okay. I run an independent travel agency. Is there any small business grant to offer the relief of travel businesses which are hit hard? And will the state and local fund to help small business benefit tourism businesses?
Number one, on your first question. On your first question is that I am not aware of any grants for travel. You obviously still have PPP loans and EIDL loans in regards to that you could apply for, but I'm not aware of any grants. Now, that may change, all right? And that's kind of what Mark was talking about a little bit earlier, is that there's X amount of dollars being associated to states. And they may say, hey, we're going to offer a grant to the transportation industry, being not necessarily airlines, which a lot of money went to here, also the airlines, but the state and local government got some that maybe address certain markets like their local travel agencies from a grants perspective. So you just need to keep track of that within your own locality, wherever you might be. But that's that could be a ways coming, because each state is going to have to decide that, how they distribute it. And then within each state, I'm sure each county and city will also have discussions. So can't really answer that question. If you need monies now, our suggestion would be PPP or EIDL.
We are a woman-owned small business, but not a restaurant. Could we apply?
You cannot apply for the restaurant revitalization fund, but you can apply for a PPP and EIDL loan. And as a matter of fact, the changes that were done back in December actually prioritized, again, women-owned businesses to be up the line in the sense to make sure they got funding done, as minority-owned businesses and businesses in lower income census tracts. So again, EIDL, PPP would be your option if you're not a restaurant for right now.
Okay. And what, is there a certain percentage that the business needs to be female owned in order to qualify for it?
Oh, you mean like over 50% or under 50% or something?
Right.
I don't know the answer to that question.
I think to be a women-owned business, okay, and Linda, correct me if I'm wrong here, you got a woman has to own 51% or more of the business.
That is correct.
As aforementioned, my travel business has lost almost 100% loss of revenue in 2020 versus 2019. I had applied for the EIDL last year with a small grant. Will I be qualified for the target EIDL and apply for it this time?
So I'm assuming he or she is talking about the grant and not the loan from an EIDL standpoint. So if you're talking about the grant, is the first time around you had the capability to go up to $10,000 for an EIDL grant. A lot of companies obviously got substantially less than $10,000. With the new law that was passed in December and then additional monies were added to right now, the EIDL grant was opened up that you could get more monies, but here's the caveat. They weren't accepting any new applications. What they were doing is going back to everybody that applied for an EIDL grant previously that received less than $10,000. And then the SBA is looking at that and will notify you via email. The SBA is doing this directly. That says, hey, you are now qualifying for more additional dollars and what those dollars are. And then there's a link there to let you determine how to apply for that. So if that's what you're talking about, that's the way to approach it. If the SBA hasn't gotten to you yet, Linda, do you have a suggestion? If you think you
Well, I think you described it quite accurately. It's behind the scenes. There are certain parameters and they are on our website if you want to look at them. They've just added them recently, but it is the low income areas. We even have a map you can look up if you're there. And then there's also some parameters in addition to that. It depends on how much revenue you lost and it depends on the size. It's up to 300, but SBA works on that calculation. But if you're curious, you can go and look up that map, but you'll be invited to actually verify information and then apply. And timeliness is very important. You'll be asked for information within a certain time period. You send it, and that's that. If you had incorrect information, there is no reconsideration. It is what it is. So be sure it's correct on that. But you're right, Bob. Once again, you got it.
If we receive funds in 2020, where can I go to receive those records of the loan? My business partner has passed and we lost all the paperwork.
So if it's a PPP loan, I'm not sure if it's an Eidl loan or a PPP loan, but let's say, for example, it's a PPP loan, go back to the bank that you got the loan from. They should have the paperwork and explain it. Linda, I'm going to defer to you on this next question, though. This is an EIDL loan. They don't have the documentation. Is there a way that the SBA can share that documentation? Do you know?
No. You're asking if we can go back in and see what was filed before. I seriously doubt it. And part of the reason of that is the massive amount of applications that are in, and under the Freedom of Information Act, you can act if you can request information from your file, but it's a process that takes some time. You can find that on our website as well. It's the Freedom of Information Act. But if you're not the entity that applied, you can't really request. A lot of that's proprietary, and you probably wouldn't be granted access to that. So I would recommend seeking other sources.
But if the person that did it died, Linda, there's got to be some ability to access that. So you may get a lot of questions from the SBA, like copy a death certificate or something. Just be prepared for all that stuff, right? Because Linda's right.
Yes,
share that information.
Exactly. It's a process, but if you just, let's say it's a PPP loan and you just wanted us to go in and tell you what was in that file, your banker is your contact on that. But yeah, it can be done. It's a process.
Okay, are food purchases eligible expenses for the RRF restaurant grant?
My understanding is yes.
I already got my second round of PPP, but it wasn't based on line 7. How do I get additional funds?
Bob, I think you already answered that. But the issue is, if your bank has reported that loan to SBA yet, pretty much if you got a disbursement on, they had, so they can't go back in. If they had not, you can ask your lender to withdraw the loan and then you reapply. But it's not likely that situation would apply to you. It's possible, but in other words, it's not designed to go backwards, but forwards on new loans going forward. I think Mark covered that as well too.
Yes.
Do food trucks apply?
Sure.
Yep.
For
Food trucks, pop-ups, yes.
Mhm.
That's a good point. I probably forgot to mention that, but yeah.
Does the new act allow SBA to extend payments to such loans as a 7A?
I believe that deferral applies to all SBA loans, correct? That 12-month or 24-month, or is it just the COVID loans, Linda?
In fact, that was just in a meeting. There's so many nuances on that. What was happening is SBA was actually making payments, principal and interest, depending on when you got that loan. But on the deferment, I can look that up. If someone will shoot a question into the chat, and I can follow up later, or SCORE may want to do that, but we would have to look specifically on.
We'll follow up later. Now, the information we have indicates it's disaster loans only. It's not the traditional SBA like a 7A loan. Okay, so what are disaster loans? Okay, EIDL is a disaster loan. All right, a hurricane, tornado, whatever floods that funding is done is disaster loans. Those are disaster loans. Saying all that, we'll confirm that and get back to you.
I have grocery stores with full-fledged kitchen and dine-in services. Will that qualify for an RRF grant? When all the rules come out, you really have to look at that. My initial reaction will be probably not, unless it's over 50% of your total revenue, meaning your food and everything else that you provide is over 50% of your total revenue. So what's the majority? Are you a restaurant, or are you a grocery store? And that's the 50% rule, I think, is what's going to apply here. I don't think all those rules are identified yet. Again, as they become identified, we will let you know. But my gut would say no, if it's not more than 50%. We used a PEO, a professional employer organization for employees. Therefore, we don't directly file payroll reports. Do we qualify for the employment retention tax credits? And how would we handle this?
My understanding is that if you use a third party, that does still count, and you will have to work with your CPA specifically on how to go through that. My understanding is all payroll providers, whether they be just like ADP being a third party or PEOs, have built all kinds of reporting to be able to support every line item of every COVID question related to payroll costs that they can report to you. But certainly check with your CPA.
Okay. I believe the deferral on payments on an EIDL loan's interest continues to accrue. How can we find the amount of interest accrued to date on these disaster EIDL loans? It doesn't seem to show on the invoices monthly.
Well, as you can tell by our non-response, that's a good question.
I will say this on the prior question about the deferment. Bob is absolutely correct. I went back and I looked at the press release on that. He is exactly right. It's on disaster loans only for the additional deferrals.
So Linda, I'm going to throw this question to you to find out the answer on that one.
Okay.
We're not seeing those documents. I mean, what's being talked about, it sounds like EIDL loans, you're getting monthly updates on those loans. So we're not seeing those documents, what they look like. What's showing.
Oh, you mean the press releases you're talking about, or? Sure.
No, the last question on
question.
what interest there is on EIDLs.
Oh, yeah. On the interest rate on the EIDL is 3.75 for businesses, 2.75 for nonprofits. And it's not forgivable.
The question was, am I accruing, is it deferring, or is the government paying for it? It's not showing anything about interest. It's not showing anything about my interest on a monthly basis. It's deferring?
Yeah, it's deferred. And during that period of time, you are accruing interest. You do have the option to make payments in the interim, but the thought was that a lot of folks can't make those payments. So they've deferred them with interest.
So they want to know when will we find out, or when will everyone be notified of the extension of the 12 to 24 months on the EIDL loans?
I think that's in place, right?
Well, number one, I think we just clarified it. It's only for disaster loans, and it's in place now.
Okay.
It's effective immediately.
And you can always check through pay.gov on your loan. So you could actually pay if it was already set up in pay.gov, and it probably was.
And I would like to know what other industries can benefit from this, as I'm on the transportation industry, or I'm in the transportation industry.
So what we covered today is the only thing the transportation industry can't participate in is the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, all right? Other than that, you can participate in the PPP program, the EIDL program, the ERTC, energy employee, whatever, I can never remember that one, Mark.
Employee retention tax credit.
Thank you. So those three you can participate in. The only one you cannot is the RFF and obviously the venue program, because you're not a venue.
And are there any updates or any information that is available on loans and grants for farmers?
You know, that there's some monies associated here, and I don't know if Linda, if that's going through the SBA or the USDA.
The farmers can apply for the PPP and the Eidl. In the past, they had not been able to in disaster loans, but they can. There may be other loans out there through the USDA for disaster, but as far as SBA goes, they're already included in the PPP and Eidl this time around. I don't believe they're on the Texas severe storms that was recently declared, but they are on these COVID programs.
Yep. So what I would suggest to that person is you can apply for an EIDL as a farmer, as a farm business, and a PPP or a PPP. Also, because we're just not that familiar with that organization, you may also want to check USDA.gov to see what specific programs they have. There could be some additional funding coming out that is unrelated to everything we've talked about, that's very focused just to the farm businesses. And that may, if that probably does happen, it'll probably come through the USDA. But we'll keep
Okay.
you updated on that.
Okay, this is a SBA question for Linda. I received the first round of the PPP, but the amount funded was incorrect and too much. We returned the funds that were over the correct amount through our bank to the SBA. And applying for the second round PPP, when referring to the first PPP, the amounts were still wrong, and therefore the fund amounts were populated for the second PPP is wrong. We are thinking our only chance now is to pull back on our second round application and then refile the second again with the correct info. Would that be the right thing to do?
The right thing is to get with your lender, and hopefully you're using the same lender for the second as the first round, which is highly recommended. But they can go back in and check on that. If your eligibility if you were eligible for a certain amount and you just didn't want to take all of that, you can go back in under the first and ask that those be reinstated. You would go through your lender for that. So that's the answer. Get with your lender on that.
I was granted an EIDL for my trucking company last June. Am I eligible for the PPP loan? And if so, which one, the first or the second?
You can get both EIDL and PPP, and if you don't have a PPP, you'd be doing a first draw PPP application.
Just keep in mind, you can't cover the same cost with those two. So the assumption, let's just say, hey, I have 100,000, you need to cover, your EIDL was going to cover 50,000 of qualified expenses. Then your PPP could cover the other 50. You can't double dip. You can't get paid for doing the same thing twice.
I have just heard, Bob, that you actually, it might be the same expense, but a different time period for that expense. I'm starting to hear that. So, but yeah, the double dipping is something that you can't do between the programs.
I found the calculation for the restaurant grant. It's based on revenue, not expenses incurred. Businesses that tried to stay open will be hurt more than those that shut down. Will they reconsider the calculation if there's a lot of feedback from those that tried to stay open?
The regulations are just coming out on that. I have to say that whoever asked the question has gotten some real advanced information there, but you might want to check on our website, sba.gov/coronavirus relief. And there's all the programs, and they're really doing their best to update them daily. So you might want to check there.
Can sole proprietors apply? Is the business registration date of February 2020 still applicable in new legislation? What is the reference? Is it a PPP or an Eidl or?
Well, let's assume it's both. Let's assume it's a PPP or an Eidl. It basically is still February 15, 2020 is the date. So yes, you can still apply. The monies are still out there. You can still apply.
ERTC, yeah, the ERTC will be available for businesses that started after February 15th, 2020, based on the criteria in the slide that we presented earlier.
And the Eidl is a little bit different on that date, Bob. I believe it's January the 31st for the Eidl that you had to be in business prior to. And the SVOG grant is a little bit different date, but they were talking about loans. So it's on the site though. If you'll follow the links that were provided on the SCORE site, you'll see that information.
Okay, I need funds to hire more employees. How do I get grants if I'm a nonprofit 501c3?
Well, from our perspective, we don't know of any. However, there are a lot of grants for nonprofits out there that are that have come out because of COVID and also before COVID, right? That are grants to grow. So you need to be looking at your nonprofit. What type of specific nonprofit is there? Is it an association you belong to? Are they providing grants? Can you reach out to that association and ask them? They would probably have a better feel for those grants that are very focused on nonprofits, 501c3 specifically. We do not know of any right now for nonprofits besides what's very focused on specific industries for the nonprofit.
That correct. But if it's federal grants, it's grants.gov. You can go in and double check on that. But I think Bob is right.
For the second PPP, do I have to show the 25% loss in the same quarter of 2019 and 2020, or can it be 25% in 2019 or 2020? And for the EIDL targeted, I got the email and we are in a low income area, but we had a 25% loss. Can I still submit the application for it?
Well, that's a big question. I'm stuck on the first part of that. Do you mind repeating? Let's try the first part of that. Those are two questions,
Sure.
really.
For the second PPP, do I have to show a 25% loss in the same quarter of 2019 and 2020, or can it be 25% in 2019 or 2020?
So the answer, let me answer that, Lynn. So the answer is you can pick any quarter in 2019 compared to the same quarter in 2020, and it's got to be a reduction. So if your first quarter 2019 compared to your first quarter 2020 gave you the 25%, that's what you go with. All right. So it's got to be, you pick one quarter, but it can't be the first quarter in 2019 and the third quarter in 2020. It's got to be first quarter in 2019, first quarter in 2020. Okay. But you can pick any quarter. It's up to you what quarter you want to pick. Then the EIDL. Can you give that quick?
Okay,
Sure.
yeah, there was another one out there. Okay.
For the EIDL targeted, I got the email and we are in a low income area, but we have a 25% loss. Can I still submit the application for it?
It's really supposed to be for 30% loss on that. There's nothing stopping you from presenting it, but it doesn't meet eligibility. And you can double check that by going back onto our website. They're putting all the rules on there. That's what I think. What do you think, Bob? Do you have?
No, I would agree with you.
Yep.
Okay, I am a sole owner with an inactive business with no employees and did not file my taxes because I made so little. Can I still use the form 3508S?
That's one of the PPP applications, I think.
That's the short. That's the short.
That's the easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's for $150,000 or less. I believe that's the one for it. But you're not operating anymore, right? Was that the question? You're not operating, and you're looking for the PPP, but you've already gotten the PPP and you got the funds. Is that right?
It didn't say, it just says he's in an active business with no employees. He didn't file taxes, but he's wanting to see if he can still use that form.
So here's the bottom line I think he needs to go to. Number one, that's a PPP, and he needs to work with his bank, right?
There you go. Ding, ding, ding. That is
So
the
he needs
correct
to go to
answer.
his banking institution. There's a lot of questions we have around what he just said there, what he or she said there, the clarification, but the bank is making the decision, all right, on whether to take it or not. So I wouldn't worry about what form to fill out. I would actually go talk to, well, I guess I would worry about what form to fill out, but then you're going to have to work with the bank to see if they allow that to happen or not, because banks have a little bit more leniency than they have in the past on the rules that they want to accept loans through PPP. That was something that was brought in at the end of the December Act. So they have a lot more flexibility, and they may have different requirements from bank to bank. So make sure you check with your bank.
And their form could be a little bit different as long as they cover everything. So that's right. They'll have, maybe it's online, maybe it's a little bit different looking than ours, but that's right. There is a little bit more flexibility there.
One more, and then we're out of time, Jenny. Jenny, you're muted.
Sorry, let me find a good one.
They're all, by the way, they're all good.
I mean, they're all good.
Not a 4-part one though. Okay, we only have time for a 1-part one. Okay?
Our memories can't handle all those 4 parts.
All right, we'll do we submitted paperwork for forgiveness of the PPP on the first round. We provided additional information for clarification for forgiveness. There seems to be no communication on the forgiveness to the bank or ourselves. How long does the forgiveness take?
I know Bob knows it depends on the size of the loan for one thing. The target is 60 days for the bank and then 90 days for SBA to look at it. Everyone tries to do it in shorter period of time, but if you're looking at a loan of over $2 million, some of those are indeed taking longer than the times I just quoted, because there's a lot of things that they have to look at on those.
So let's say it's 100, it could be worst case scenario, 150 days, maybe, let's say. However, if it was my business, I'd be checking with that bank every 3 or 4 weeks, right? Like, hey, what's the status? What's happening? I wouldn't be waiting to hear back from them. I would be proactive in saying, where do I sit? Where is it at? So please be proactive on that. Don't wait, because maybe something fell through the cracks, right? And you're waiting, it's just going to hurt you. So be proactive in following up with the bank. So
Bob, some of those, okay, I was just going to say, some of those it's the verification between the information on the first and the second too. So there is a tool you can go back and actually look up your first loan on that.
Okay. So, hey, we're out of time. We do appreciate everybody's time. Again, we know this is very stressful. It's been very stressful for about a year now. Hopefully we're getting better, and 6 months from now, we'll be in the best shape. We'll be in great shape, I should say. But keep in mind, we're here to help you. So you've got our contact information from an SBA score standpoint. Feel free to reach out to us at any time for any one-on-one questions, and we'll be glad to follow up as quickly as possible. So thank you. Have a great rest of the week, huh?
All right, everybody.
Thank you,
Goodbye.
everyone.
See ya.
Goodbye.